when I gifted my daughter Charlotte a newly built home as a wedding gift. I thought I was giving her a fresh, joyful start. A place to build a beautiful life with the man she loved. The house, nestled in the quiet hills of Sonoma, California, was nothing short of perfect. Every detail had been carefully chosen, from the handcrafted oak cabinets to the marble countertops imported from Italy. My husband Mason had poured his heart and soul into every inch of that house, wanting only the best for our only daughter. Charlotte's fiancé, Ryan Peterson, had seemed like a decent man. Polite, charming, attentive. But the moment his family showed up, everything changed. They came not with gratitude, but with entitlement. His parents, brother, and sister-in-law moved in like royalty returning to their estate. The very first words out of his mother's mouth were, "We'll be taking the master bedroom." As if my daughter was just the help. They never said thank you. Never asked permission. They treated the gift like it was owed to them. I had thought I was giving my daughter a home. What I didn't know was, I had just declared war on a family who only knew how to take. The renovations were finally complete, and Mason couldn't wait to show Charlotte and Ryan the final result. He was practically glowing with pride as we walked up the stone path lined with lavender bushes, the air thick with anticipation. But before we could even step inside, we heard her. "Oh God, what is this? A gated prison." The voice was unmistakable. Ryan's mother, Barbara Peterson. I froze mid-step. You expect guests to ring a bell like strangers. "Tear that thing down, Ryan! This neighborhood needs to be more welcoming." Inside, it only got worse. Barbara was already wandering the living room, her eyes scanning every corner like she was appraising cattle. Ryan's father, Frank, was lighting a cigarette. In the living room. "Damn fine ventilation," he said, puffing smoke toward the ceiling. "Smells like money." And then came the moment that told me everything I needed to know. Barbara plopped down, shoes on, onto the master bed, kicking off her heels and stretching out like she was at a motel. "This'll do. Great light, we'll take the master." I turned to Mason, my blood pressure rising. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. We both turned to Ryan. But Ryan, he just looked at the floor, hands in his pockets, pretending not to notice. Not one word of protest. Not one ounce of respect for the gift we had given them. Barbara's voice echoed again, this time from down the hallway. "Oh, this smaller room's perfect for Travis and Jenna. Call them and tell them to start packing. We'll be moving in this weekend." Charlotte's eyes widened. "Wait. What?" Frank didn't skip a beat. "The boy needs a stable home. We'll list the property under Travis's name. You and Ryan can come back after you have kids." That was it. Mason reached out and gripped my wrist tightly. A silent plea, let her handle this. She needs to. And to her credit, Charlotte found her voice. This house was a gift. From my parents. Not a hotel. You don't get to move in, assign rooms, or make decisions. This is our home, not yours. Barbara's expression twisted into something feral. "Oh, sweetheart," she sneered. "When you marry into a family, you marry into our way of doing things. We're not asking. We're staying. And as our daughter-in-law, you'll take care of us. Cooking, cleaning, the works." Charlotte's voice trembled, but she didn't back down. "If you want maids and cooks, hire them. I'm not your servant." That was the moment I knew. She was done playing nice. But Ryan, he finally spoke, and what he said would break my daughter's heart wide open. "Charlotte, just don't make a big deal. They're trying to help. Just apologize." It felt like the oxygen was sucked out of the room. Charlotte looked at him like he was a stranger. Mason stepped forward, his face darkening, but I raised a hand. "Not yet." Charlotte had one more thing to say, and it would change everything. Charlotte's eyes, usually soft and understanding, hardened like glass. She turned toward Ryan slowly, deliberately. "Apologize to them." Her voice was low, razor sharp. "You watched your father burn a cigarette into my new nightstand and didn't say a word. You watched your mother lie back in my bed with her filthy shoes, and said nothing. And now you're telling me to apologize." The room fell into stunned silence. Ryan tried to laugh it off, nervously rubbing the back of his neck. "Come on, babe. Don't be so sensitive. It's not like they meant harm. That's when Mason stepped forward. No, son, he said, his tone deceptively calm. They didn't mean harm. They meant disrespect, and you, by staying silent, agreed with it. Barbara let out a snort, arms crossed. Oh please, this house wouldn't even exist without our son. Don't act like we owe anyone anything. She jabbed a finger toward Charlotte. You think you're better than us. You wouldn't he have a husband if it weren't for us raising him? Charlotte's lips parted slightly as if to speak. But then Frank decided to add his voice to the mess. I'll say what we're all thinking, he growled, stepping forward. Your daughter's not exactly a catch. Past her prime, probably couldn't do better. You had to dangle this house like a carrot to keep Ryan around. Charlotte gasped, her hand instinctively flying to her chest. I heard Mason inhale sharply next to me, and for a moment, I thought he might actually tackle the man. But before either of us could speak, Charlotte stepped forward. You know what? She said, her voice shaking but fierce. You're right. I did offer this house. I did stay quiet when you criticized my clothes, my job, my personality. I tried. God, I tried to make this work. But this is the last straw. She turned to Ryan. I'm not marrying you. The words landed like a lightning strike. Barbara's mouth fell open, then quickly contorted in rage. You ungrateful brat. My son can have any woman he wants. You'll regret this. Charlotte turned to her calmly. No. I'll regret not doing this sooner. And then she did something none of us expected. She pulled the engagement ring off her finger, held it out, and dropped it right in front of Ryan's feet. It hit the hardwood with a soft clink, but echoed through the room like a gunshot. Ryan's face contorted with a mix of panic and disbelief. Charlotte, come on. Don't throw it all away. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. Charlotte didn't flinch. You never protected me. You never even tried. There's nothing left to fix. Frank started toward her, his face red with rage, but Mason stepped in, his fist clenched. One more step, and you'll be picking your teeth up off my floor. The Petersons finally got the message. One by one, they gathered their things, Barbara still mumbling about disrespect and entitlement, and shuffled out of the house like thieves caught in the act. Charlotte stood in the middle of her living room, trembling but strong. She had just thrown away her engagement and saved her future. The sun had nearly set by the time Charlotte closed the door behind the Petersons. A thick, heavy silence hung in the air like smoke after a fire. She stood still, hands trembling slightly, staring down at the ring she had dropped minutes earlier. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, she turned to her parents. I'm sorry, she said, voice hoarse but steady. I know this wasn't how you imagined things going. I just couldn't let it go any longer. Mason stepped forward, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. You did the right thing, he said simply. You were protecting yourself. That's never something to apologize for. Charlotte exhaled sharply. Kept thinking if I gave more, tolerated more, eventually, they'd respect me. That love would be enough. She shook her head. But it wasn't love. It was control. And I let them chip away at me, bit by bit, because I was too scared to lose what I thought we had. Julia reached out, wrapping her daughter in a gentle hug. That's not love, sweetheart. That's manipulation. And I'm proud of you for seeing it. That night, Charlotte didn't cry. She didn't pace the room or second-guess her decision. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, silent, eyes trained on the backyard she once thought she'd build a future in. But now she saw it differently. It wasn't a shared dream. It was hers. Entirely hers. The next morning, she woke early. Cleaned the house top to bottom. Stripped the bed the Petersons had claimed. Opened all the windows. It wasn't just about fresh air. It was about energy. Purging their presence from her home. Cleansing it of every shadow they'd left behind. And then, she opened her laptop. For too long, Charlotte had hesitated at work. Playing it safe, holding back from leadership opportunities because she didn't want to outshine Ryan. He'd always subtly discouraged her. Don't work too late. Don't let your ambitions scare people. Don't act like you've got something to prove. But now, she clicked on an old email about a regional business conference. One she'd previously ignored out of guilt. With a quick breath, she hit apply. Charlotte walked into her office that week like a woman reborn. Shoulders square, voice firm, eyes focused. Her colleagues noticed. So did her boss. By the end of the week, she had been tapped to lead a new corporate project. And just like that, her life began to shift. Not because of heartbreak, but because she had finally removed the weight keeping her from rising. There were still moments of hurt. Glimpses of what could have been. But there was no regret. Only gratitude that she saw the truth in time. Charlotte had stopped trying to be enough for people who gave her nothing. And in doing so, she had become everything she needed to be for herself. 2 weeks after cutting ties with Ryan and his family, Charlotte stood before a sea of unfamiliar faces at the regional business conference. The grand ballroom was packed with professionals from all corners of the industry. Founders, executives, ambitious young entrepreneurs. It was intimidating, but Charlotte felt something else beneath the nervous clarity. She had earned her place here. As she stepped onto the stage and began her presentation, scaling ethical leadership in modern corporations, a stillness fell over the room. Her voice didn't shake, her hands didn't fumble. Her message was bold, precise, and deeply human. And when she finished, the applause was thunderous. Backstage, a young woman approached her. "That was incredible," she said. "People talk about leadership, but you made it real. You made it feel possible." Charlotte smiled, heartwarming. This was what she had been missing all along. The freedom to be heard, respected, and to inspire others without permission. Later, during the networking lunch, she found herself at a quiet table near the windows. That's when he appeared. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. He was tall, with dark curls and thoughtful green eyes, clean-cut suit, understated presence. Something about him was grounding. "Sure," she said, gesturing to the seat beside her. "I'm Ethan Parker," he introduced, co-founder of East Bay Capital. Charlotte blinked. The name was familiar. His firm was one of the event's sponsors. Well-regarded, known for backing high-integrity ventures. "I'm Charlotte Dawson," she replied. "Granite & Co." Ethan nodded, then grinned. "I know, I watched your talk. Twice, actually. Once live, once on the recap stream. You've got a way of saying things that sticks." She raised an eyebrow, amused. "Is that your way of saying you're stalking my slides?" He chuckled. "Only the well-structured ones." Their banter was easy. No pretense, no hidden expectations. For once, Charlotte didn't feel the need to shrink herself, to play small or polite. She could just be. As the conversation shifted from market trends to weekend habits, Ethan leaned back. "You know, I usually leave these events with a stack of business cards and 0 people I actually want to talk to again. You might be the exception." Charlotte smiled, eyes crinkling. "That's funny. I was thinking the same thing." He reached into his coat and handed her a book. "Quiet Leadership. I thought you might appreciate this," he said. "There's a chapter that reminded me of your talk." She turned it over in her hands, touched by the gesture. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't performative. It was intentional, thoughtful. That night, as she sat in her hotel room with the book open on her lap, Charlotte felt something stir. Not a rush, not infatuation, but a quiet realization there is life after heartbreak. There is connection after betrayal. She wasn't looking for love. But maybe, just maybe, love had started looking for her. The weeks following the conference were transformative. Something in Charlotte had shifted, and it wasn't just because of Ethan. Though his presence brought a quiet steadiness to her days. It was the way she now saw herself. No longer through the lens of someone needing to prove her worth, but as someone who already had. She didn't just return to work, she owned her space. Projects she once tiptoed around, she tackled them head-on. Meetings where she'd once kept quiet, fearing she'd be seen as too much. She spoke with precision and clarity. People listened, respected her. The same firm that had hired her on the condition she'd stay humble now looked to her for vision. Charlotte no longer questioned her seat at the table. Meanwhile, Ethan didn't press. He showed up, present but not pushy. He sent articles he thought she'd enjoy. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. When she had a rough day, he didn't offer tired advice. He simply asked, "Do you want to vent? Or do you want help solving it?" She realized then how rare it was to feel safe in someone's presence. But perhaps the most significant growth wasn't in the boardroom or in new love. It was in the quiet reclaiming of her boundaries. One rainy morning, a letter arrived at her office. No return address, but she didn't need one. The handwriting was unmistakable Ryan's. It was long-winded, full of self-pity, regret, and subtle manipulation. He claimed he'd changed. That therapy had opened his eyes. That he finally saw how his family's behavior had hurt her. "I know now that I should have protected you," he wrote. "I was weak, but I'm trying to be strong. For you." Charlotte folded the letter in half. She didn't feel anger. Not even sadness. Only a quiet certainty. She slipped it into the shredder without a second thought. Later that evening, Ethan and Charlotte sat on a rooftop cafe, watching the city lights flicker below. The air was crisp, scented with jasmine from the rooftop garden. She told him about the letter. Not in pain, but as a footnote. "I didn't even flinch," she said softly. "A year ago, I would have spiraled." Ethan studied her, then smiled. "You've done more than move on. You've grown into someone who doesn't need closure. Because you are the closure." Charlotte turned her face toward the breeze. For the first time in her adult life, she felt whole, not because of anyone else, but because she'd finally given herself everything she used to seek in others: respect, forgiveness, patience, and strength. She didn't just survive, she rebuilt, reclaimed, rose, and now she was unstoppable. A year later, the world looked entirely different. Charlotte had moved out of the city into a quiet lakeside town, where the air smelled like pine and early morning coffee. Her home wasn't extravagant, but it was hers. Tall windows flooded the rooms with sunlight. There was a small garden filled with lavender and rosemary, and a kitchen that always smelled like fresh bread and simmering herbs. This was a life no one handed her. She built it. The home was quiet, but never lonely. On weekends, Ethan would visit, and they'd sip wine on the back deck, their legs curled up under soft blankets. He never tried to fix her. He celebrated her strength. When they disagreed, it wasn't war. It was curiosity. How rare it was, she often thought, to be loved in a way that didn't require shrinking. Her work had blossomed. What began as a career in strategy had evolved into something deeper. Mentoring other women, navigating the same emotional labyrinths she once faced. She launched workshops, hosted talks, even began writing a book. She titled it The Cost of Silence. People reached out from across the country. Women in their 20s, 30s, 60s. Some had just gotten out of toxic relationships. Others were still inside them. One message read, "I thought I was the only one who'd ever bought her own engagement ring just to feel worthy. Thank you for giving me permission to walk away." Charlotte didn't just survive, she became a light for others still lost in the fog. As spring turned to summer, she found herself walking a familiar path along the lake, her steps calm, measured. The same path she used to walk as a girl, tossing pebbles into the water, believing that love meant sacrificing your voice. Now she knew better. At a clearing near the water's edge, she sat on a weathered bench, watching ducks glide past, ripples catching golden hour light. She thought about how far she'd come. From crying in a bedroom she had furnished for others, to standing proudly in a life designed entirely for herself. A soft breeze swept through the trees, and for a moment, Charlotte closed her eyes. There were no more voices telling her she wasn't enough. No more gaslighting, no more manipulation. Just peace, stillness, her own breath, her own truth. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Ethan. "Dinner on the deck tonight. I picked up that wine you liked." She smiled. Not because of the wine. Not even because of Ethan. But because she knew, without a flicker of doubt, that this time, she wasn't choosing love to be saved. She was choosing it because she had already saved herself. True love does not demand your silence. Charlotte's journey reminds us that endurance is not the same as love, and sacrifice is not the same as respect. For years, she silenced herself, convinced that tolerance would earn her a seat at someone else's table. But love that costs your voice, your peace, and your dignity is not love. It's imprisonment. The moment she stopped begging to be seen, and chose to stand tall in her own truth, her world transformed. She discovered that peace isn't found in pleasing others but in honoring yourself, your boundaries, and your worth. The greatest revenge was never about getting even. It was building a life so full of joy and authenticity that no one who ever doubted her could touch it. This wasn't about pride. It was about power, the quiet kind that comes from choosing yourself every single time. If you in a relationship where you constantly explaining your worth, it's time to pause. Ask yourself, am I being loved, or merely being used? Reflect on what you've tolerated under the guise of loyalty. Make a list of non-negotiables, things you will no longer compromise on, whether it's emotional respect, financial equality, or simply peace of mind. Protect it like your life depends on it. Because it does. You owe no one an explanation for walking away from harm. You owe yourself everything.